going on, my man? How are you?
Hey, what's going on? Thank you guys for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. I'll let fellow New Yorker Ding start this one off. I'll give him the honors.
Yeah, brother. Always great to talk to you, man. Thank you so much for giving us a little bit of your time. Obviously, I you asked me a question off camera, and I'll spoil this for the audience. Obviously, my answer to you is we'll talk about it on the show. But
Yeah.
first things first, I just kind of want to say, great performance in both round two. Like Corey said, not the outcome you want in round two, but you're going up against a guy that we now know. In both the fights that he's had that we've seen, dude doesn't move. So there's something about what he's got on, his chin, his grit, his determination, his willpower. And it hurts me to say that because he's Canadian and I've been
I
getting made
definitely,
fun of.
hands down, after that match, I could definitely say the lightweights, I definitely think he has the best chin in the lightweight division. After that match alone and seeing what all the matches and how they've come out, the lightweight division, I would definitely give that to him, 100%.
I agree with that. And you know what? It was great to see your chin tested. Obviously, early on, you get dropped. You knee, I think in the second round, you don't actually drop, but
You
you
want to
go.
hear something crazy about that, though? In
Yeah.
my mind, I thought those were vice versa. I thought the first round, I stood there and then took a knee, and then the second round is when I got down. I had that whole thing vice versa in my head, and then watching it back kind of threw me off. I'm like, oh shit.
Yeah, so I mean, kudos to you because typically we see your chin worsen as time goes on. In your case, it actually seemed like your chin got a bit better. I was
Yeah.
interested by, and I we talked to Josh about this last week. I was interested by I called it a standing TKO, and what I mean by that is, oftentimes, and I'll use Nate Bernard as an example. Obviously, he goes into round one against Damian DeBell. He gets dropped, stands back up, doesn't make the 10 count to the referee's liking, and they wave it off. Sure, he's standing, but I wouldn't call that a standing TKO. What I would call
Yeah.
a standing TKO is where the referee looked at you, didn't like what they saw before they even got to the count. You never went down in that round, but he said, "We're done." I'm not exactly sure what he saw. I mean, you definitely didn't look like you liked that strike, but I thought you absorbed it pretty well, given the fact that, again, in round one, you dropped. In round two, you took a knee. In round three, you didn't do either of those things. Do you know what he saw in your, I mean, just looking back at that and then remembering what you experienced in the moment, was he
Honestly,
right for calling that off?
see, this is my thing with that. Honestly, the way I look at everything, I was arguing with him, and I remember the whole thing. I remember arguing with him, everything like that. But as his job, he is a professional referee. So I think maybe my eye might have been maybe like a little twitch or something like that. That might have been like, okay, like this is what we got to call it. But I don't think it was fair to call only because I wasn't going to strike again and I wasn't going to get hit again. So that's what kind of threw me off, especially when I was fighting with the ref at that point too. But at the end of the day, I can't argue it. I can only move forward from it. But yeah, that definitely threw me off 100%. But I'm thinking maybe my eye was twitching or he saw something that maybe he didn't like, and right there he called it. But it blows my mind, honestly.
Yeah, so obviously you're coming off round one, a pretty emphatic, knockout, an impressive victory, and you go up against this guy, and the first time you hit him, he nothing happens. He doesn't move. He doesn't do anything, which is reminiscent of what he looked like in round one. And as the fight
Yes.
goes on, obviously we see that continues. What are you thinking in that moment where you just had a round one knockout virtually a week ago, and you get to this guy, you hit him, and nothing happens? What's going through your head?
So in that situation, see, I looked at it a little differently because the match before in round one, I knew that was gonna be a breeze regardless. I knew that wasn't gonna be too much of a challenge, and that's no disrespect to Gianni. He definitely hit me with a good shot, and that's all respect to him for even stepping on that stage, 100%. But with Josh, he's more my size, not really my build. He's more on the athletic side, but. Once I knew that, I knew it wasn't going to be an easy just one knockout. I knew it was going to be an actual war. And the way that it played out, I would say defensively, I would say I probably did my best defensively. Offensively, there was definitely some things I can work on 100%. But when I first hit him and he didn't move, my mind was blown because I'm thinking after my first round, I had like the lightning of God on my hand and like I was just knocking everybody out. So I sat there. They didn't show it in the show, but it was funny. I sat there after I hit him. I'm just staring. I'm like, what the fuck? He's just still. He just went like this and just stood there. I'm like, oh man. So I just sat there staring for a second. I'm like, all right, let's get it. But regardless of how the outcome, even round one, round two, I bring the intensity throughout every single round, regardless of how it's going to be. You know, some people will get discouraged by that and think, okay, I lost. I'm not going to give it my all. I push to the very end, you know what I mean? And I always give it my full, regardless of the outcome.
Yeah, I mean, listen, you touched on it. Your personality, nevertheless, it's inbred in you. It's who you are, and I think that's something that is very difficult to teach. Some would argue you can't teach it. So my hats off to you. Obviously, always incredible. Before I turn it over to Corey, I want you to do me a solid and ask that question again that you asked me before we started filming, and I'm going to answer it, and then I'll turn it over to Corey to answer it from his point of view.
All right, sounds good. And thank you. I appreciate that. You know, my personality, that's one thing I really strive for. That's one of my best traits. So I do appreciate you noticing that and saying that. The question that I did have for you off camera, and I really wanted to know, because the first interview, I know you guys were talking about my chin, and I don't blame you because I had it out there like an idiot. But the changes I had from round 1 to round 2, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think looking back at it, and let me see if we actually can pull this up. It might be a little bit better if we can have this conversation. So we'll go through obviously this first part of it. You know, you strike first, and once we go through strike number 1, I'll cut this off. So obviously we talked about this, the fast windup, but you're accurate. So I don't think it's a bad strategy. But again, you see him and you're like, oh shit, you know, not really a whole lot on that one. But I do think the fast windup. Yeah, so we asked him the fast windup. He said kind of freaked him out. So I don't think it's something you should get rid of for sure in your toolkit. But here we see you tucked it.
You know, it's funny. They actually cut a part of this because I was sitting there with the ref for like a minute straight. He kept trying to push it up. I just kept pushing it down.
Yeah. So he hits you right on the money. You get up very fast. You know, having experienced that, obviously you take a knee to ground yourself. Having experienced that, would you, in theory, you know, in hindsight, would you have stayed sitting a little bit longer?
No, I think. See, my thing is, it's all off base reactions. You know, I don't think about it till it goes up there. And when I was up there at the moment, you know, my first reaction was just to get up. And then, like you said, yeah, maybe I should have took maybe stayed down a little longer. But that's why I ended up having to take the knee, because I realized I do need a second. But I think at the moment it was more so I just got dropped, so I have to get up. And then now, okay, I'll take a knee on myself versus him putting me down. You know.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we see it there. You obviously tuck your chin quite well. Again, just whatever he hits you with. But I also would say that difference is likely a part of why your chin seemed to get, I'll say, better or more durable as time went on, which is typically not what you see. It's usually the opposite, right?
Yeah.
You know, Azael, who's sitting backstage right now, when he fought John Davis for 5 rounds, you start to see in rounds 4 and 5, now John Davis is starting to be like, all right, this is serious. But in the beginning, he's like, oh, these strikes are nothing. As time goes on, though, that accumulation, Azael's dishing power every time, and you know, it's getting better. So it started to wear on a guy like the champion. For you, it was the opposite. It seemed like you get better over time. Again, I don't know what happened round 3. I wasn't up there. I'm not the ref. But it just seemed like you were absorbing the strikes a little bit better, and I think part of that is probably the strategy change and how your chin was positioned and then the way that you want it. And I do know that the referees place you guys, and like you said, they cut that stuff out. Corey, what were your thoughts on that video you saw?
Yeah, so it's actually funny because when I actually watched that strike back, it actually reminded me a little bit of Wolverine, you know, versus Austin Turpin, where number 1, where he was pushing the pace, because the windup was faster than normal, and you actually changed the arm slot of your arm on the delivery of your strike. You know, so this is where I think the advanced level is getting with strikers that make things different, because you're changed. So based off the position of the jaw, you change the trajectory of your arm to get better placement on the button. So I think that's more of an advanced technique that you may or may not have even thought about. But I also think it even goes even further on the defensive side of things as well, because obviously you can have your chin out, your chin back. I think that's like, you know, basic 101 of defense. I think really the second, I mean, what we're starting to see now is we're starting to see guys utilize the platform as a third appendage, you know, more or less. So they're a tripod. They use the table for bracing, We see guys that transfer their weight from side to side to absorb. We see guys that more so want to lean into, like a Russell Rivera, that will lean into your strike. And so I think the evolution and how you think about absorbing it, or even another prime example, who's coming tomorrow, Darius, he's notorious for the roll. So, getting into the more advanced levels, and as this continues, I'm not saying there's any one right or one wrong. I think obviously the chin placement was better. And I think the next level is like, okay, now if that's one aspect, and I think Josh is a different animal. And I think to be able to defend from him, you're going to need to incorporate some of these other techniques into it to better absorb that, because it's still so fresh, it's still new. I mean, we're sitting here at 155. I mean, is there 6 guys maybe still under, still, right? How many were on the show? 10 or 12 plus for Trujillo.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
We're still relatively new. Obviously, it's still working its way through here, and we're going to see the evolution of it. I think it's going to be an incredibly exciting class. 155 is very obviously competitive and deep in the UFC. I think it has that potential to be very, very deep here as well. And we're going to get a lot of really good matches. And, I think you have a bright future ahead of you. I hope you're training incredibly hard every day. I hope you're focusing on that next time, and you're ready when that phone call comes, man, because definitely want to see more of you for sure.
I appreciate that. And once my next fight, you're gonna see a whole different animal. You're gonna see partially the knockout animal from round 1, and then you're gonna see the defensive side from round 2. But like you said, there's gonna be a lot of touches on it to make it where it's actually perfect. Because you can only get better; it can't get worse.
100%, man. We appreciate you joining, my man. We're running a little bit long, unfortunately, but we'll catch up with you again real soon. And all the very best. And hopefully we see you back up there at the table real soon.
Thank you, guys. Always a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Take care, my man. Appreciate you, dude.
Thanks, bro.
Thank you.